Both of our mayors are here. Let the dialogue begin. We thought we would have a dialogue with some questions, and we could move back and forth and see how the dialogue develops. And so, as I said, here's two mayors which have very appreciable international leading histories and legacies in terms of leadership of their cities in the areas of environment sustainability. Now, you take a look at that broad palette of initiatives, and I kind of want to ask them, out of that, what were the sort of the number one, the most significant, the accomplishment in environment sustainability that you're most proud of? May I start with you, Mayor Villaraigosa?
Well, remember for me, just celebrated my 60th birthday, and growing up in LA in the 1950s, you know, I think, looking at some of the people here, not all of them.
Yeah, be careful.
You know, we remember when we couldn't go outside for PE, when the air was, you know, strangling you, if you will, and choking the lifeblood out of the LA community. And growing up here with smog, the way I did, I've known for a very long time, certainly since I've been in public life, how important it is for us to address air quality. And what am I most, I don't like talking about what I'm most proud of, but I think the biggest challenge that I wanted to address was to address this notion of the city being a city of smog and trying to move us toward a city of sustainability. You know, we're at, we set a goal of 20% renewables by 2010. We hit that number and we've kept it going. But more importantly, we signed on to Kyoto, as did, I think there were about 150 mayors that signed on when I got elected in 2005. I signed on within a couple of weeks of getting elected or inaugurated. We committed to the Kyoto Accords, reducing carbon emissions to 7% below 1990 levels by 2010. We're at 28% for the city. Only Toronto, as I understand it, London and Copenhagen are ahead. And you would never know that. I'll bet 95% of the people here didn't know it, except for maybe some of the people that study this. But that's where we're at. So I'm proud of that. But I'm more proud of, in a couple of weeks, I will be signing agreements to get completely off of coal by 2025.
Wow.
We'll be out of Navajo in 2015. Intermountain, looks like 2025. It will be a big deal. So those are some things we're proud of. There are others, but let me just say, when I was asked to be here with David, and this is my alma mater, by the way. I was bugging, you know, we got, and I'm proud of that. I love this place. You know, I wouldn't be mayor if I hadn't had the opportunity to come to UCLA. But I was saying that for me to be here with David, I mean, let's be absolutely clear. The introduction you gave of me, most of the people in this town don't know about those accomplishments because you wouldn't read it in the newspaper of record that doesn't really talk about anything significant or positive that happens in this town. And it's very true. I mean, it's very true. I mean, like David will tell you, I go around the world and people know this, and we don't know it here because they don't write about it. But we do know what David's done, and Toronto is a great city, and any of you who've ever been there, the livability there, and David headed up the C40, and you know, I wanted to be here because I look to Toronto as one of the cities that we'd love to emulate and replicate and learn from. And that's really what I think, and I'll give this as an opportunity for David to say something, but I always tell people when we went to Copenhagen and we were there as we were trying to, the world was discussing what we do after Kyoto, you know, the presidents, the heads of government were elbowing each other and pointing fingers at one another to see who could do the least. The mayors were elbowing each other and to see who could do the most. There was a competition among us, and I think there's a big difference between mayors and cities and their role in climate change than there is national governments who have filled this responsibility to kind of say, well, I've done my part, you need to do more, or you're more responsible for this, and it was a different thing, and so I just wanted to be here with David and talk a little bit about what we're doing here in LA and what he's doing in Toronto and what we can all do to improve our environment, you know, in the world.
Can I just pick up on what Mayor Villaraigosa said? And first of all, it's very gracious of you to compliment Toronto. We'd certainly like your weather if we could arrange. I went to the gym this morning, and I leave the guest house in my shorts and T-shirts, and there are all these students walking by wearing sweaters and scarves. I thought, like, this is June weather, dude, you know, hello? And your record also, Mayor, is tremendous. And I just, the example you gave about smog, I think, speaks to why mayors are effective and why we act on this issue. Part of it's from moral beliefs and ethical beliefs, particularly around climate change. National governments have been shameful. I mean, some signed on to Kyoto and did nothing. Others have left Kyoto. Others never signed on. But a mayor's job is to make real practical change that people can see. And, you know, if you grow up in a city at a time where there's a significant smog problem, which has huge health implications, all sorts of implications, many of which cost the public purse a lot, you know, it's the mayor's duty to try and change that. And people can literally see it. And part of it's about coal, part of it's about transportation. And I think that's one of the reasons mayors have tended to lead. You know, in our case, one of the things I was proud of, and I'm like Tony, I don't like talking about my accomplishments in that way, but I don't know how well people know Toronto's government here, but the mayor's elected at large across the city. The city's almost 3 million people. Councillors are elected by ward, and there's 44 of them. And there's no political parties. So from the mayor's perspective, it's like working with 44 political parties. And that's in the morning. And our council couldn't always come to agreement. Quite famously, early on in my first term as mayor, we couldn't agree when to break for lunch and spent the entire lunch break debating on when to break for lunch, and then lunch was over. And on environmental issues, though, the people of Toronto expected leadership. And I was able to get a climate change plan that adopted the Kyoto targets and put massive funding into it, funding that ended up being in the billions of dollars over 7 years, really significant funding, through council unanimously. And I think that spoke to a whole range of things. You know, the mayor has to show leadership, but it also spoke to the fact that civil society had been waiting for action on the environment. They weren't seeing it at the national level, and they'd put their hopes into the local level. And, you know, that plan is still Toronto's plan, and there have been numerous actions, and we can talk about those later, from, you know, transit to waste management to building retrofits to citizen engagement strategies, very important part of it. But, you know, you don't get many victories on important substantive issues about billions of dollars unanimously. And I like that one. I like to win anyway. That's politicians like to achieve their goals. Mm-hmm. But it spoke, I think, to really what Torontonians wanted.
I have 15 councillors, so they're actually more power. I used to be Speaker of the Assembly, as you know. So I would prefer having 44 because it's a bigger group of people, and once you get 8 to 10 of them, you move. It's a little, mine are very powerful in their own districts. We've had to struggle, I'll be honest. I mean, most of the critics, not so much environmentalists, but the paper, others, were critical of the goal of 20% renewables. They said, well, where did that come from? Why? We had to build support. It cost money, as you said, so rates, it affected rates, and there was a lot of demagoguery around the rates. Our rates are still lower than the investor-owned utilities. In the end, we got it through, in part because I moved it, and in part because there was a majority. But we had a tougher, I mean, people liked the 20% goal. They didn't want to take the responsibility of saying, hey, this is going to cost us more money. We're going to have to make an investment in the future. And it doesn't help right now, different than Canada. I mean, we still have politicians, particularly on the right, that don't believe climate change is an issue, that believe strongly that this is something made-up science. So there's not the unanimity, the public policy unanimity that you have in Europe and in Canada, where people understand that 98% of the Nobel Prize winning climatologists have said this is real. I mean, we're still debating it in the United States, which is why on the national level you have so little in the way of progress.
We were lucky well, lucky's wrong, but just before I proposed our climate change strategy to City Council, we had a winter with no snow. Yeah. and people said, wait a minute, this isn't normal, there's something wrong here. Snow's a good thing, by the way. And it happened to be right when Al Gore came out with The Inconvenient Truth. So, those in the community who were strongly supportive of environmental initiatives had a moment, and we were able to seize that moment. And I do think Canada's more progressive on these issues, but there's still some dissent, and they're the Consul General's bosses, so, close your ears, Consul General, but this particular government's not known for its support of initiatives to fight climate change.
So let me just ask the question then.
That is your role.
Yep, you've been both, you guys, I'm learning here, I just to sit back and let it go, but you both have been successful in getting the public, in getting members of your city councils, boroughs, ridings, whatever, to come together and tackle things. And so here we are in a time of shrinking in somewhat fiscal resources and all of that. We have national governments that are more, or less, or change in terms of their interest in these things, and we have a populace that's worried about the economics. What is the advice you have for incoming mayors who have issues of, let's say, energy and waste? These are two things you both have tackled, and you've been successful in tackling these things. What is the general advice you can give to the next leadership and coming up when they're going to have to tackle in their cities issues of energy and waste? They're going to have to build those consensus. They're going to have to get people to sign on. What's the secret formula that you guys have had that allowed you to be so successful?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, and I mean to say it, I mean, I think it's, I believe in it. I'm driven. I push hard. The mayor of LA doesn't have the power that the mayor of New York or Chicago does. They have legislatures, not powerful city councils. New York is a city and county both, as San Francisco is. So they run the schools. I have to elect the school board, which is I'm in the middle of a big battle on. So I think for me, I've used the bully pulpit. I'm not afraid of it. I am the mayor, and there will only be, there may be an election going on, but there will only be one mayor until June 30th at 11:59 and 59 seconds. So I push hard. And we set goals. And we brought McKinsey in early in the beginning of our administration because we made a lot of campaign promises. And we put metrics by every single one. I said, we're going to be at 20% renewables. And the criticism of how we got there was that I bought on the spot market. And it's true. And I probably paid too much. But I was driven that we had to get to that goal because I know what goals are about. They push people to exceed where they have to be. Now we're buying smarter. We're going to get off of coal, and we're building our own stuff by transmission lines and the like. But I really pushed hard. The problem in this town, and I'll use the opportunity. I mean, this is one of the few cities where the mayor or the mayor's initiatives isn't on the front page of the newspaper at least once a week. I mean, you won't read about any of this. I just synchronized every traffic light in LA, the only big city over 1 million that's fully synchronized every single traffic light.
Wow.
They didn't even show up. No, the electronic media showed up, but the Times didn't even show up. They've never written about it. So what happens is it makes it difficult to engage the public that way because the bully pulpit is limited. But what I've had of it, I've pushed it. We believe in data and we believe in science. So we talked about what the benefits of all of this has been, and in the end, I did have a council that was fairly progressive. So I mean, I think there's two. It's fairly progressive council. So they, in the end, they got behind it, but it was always pushing hard and educating. But I would say more than anything, almost a single-minded focus on getting things done. Romel, my deputy mayor's here, and before him, it was Nancy Sutley, who's now the head of the National Council on Environmental Quality. And before that, we had Mary Nichols at the head of the.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, right. The head of the Department of Water and Power. So I've had these really big people who know this is what the goal is, and you got to get there.
Yeah.
I agree completely with the mayor, and it's unique to the mayor's role because you have that bully pulpit. It is a little bit easier when you're front page news all the time, which in my case, Toronto's the media capital of Canada. We have 4 daily English newspapers, 4 daily Chinese language newspapers, and. So if you weren't on the front page for good reasons, you're on the front page for bad.
That's it.
But that
I get those ones.
yeah. Well, it's funny. I was quite fortunate. I didn't lose many important votes. I lost only one as mayor, and it was to defer an issue. We were bringing in new taxes, which I'd promised to do in my re-election. I ran on a platform that said, I'm going to raise taxes and bring in new ones, but you're going to have a great city. And I got 60% of the vote. So I thought, it's interesting because the political advice you get from consultants is never say that. And I wanted to have that mandate. Anyway, I lost the new tax vote on a deferral and then ended up winning it 3 months later. But when I lost that vote, I was front page news for 4 days in 4 daily newspapers. That was too much. So I think, sorry to answer your question, Glenn, the leadership is the number one thing, absolutely. And I read a little bit about the mayoral election here in the newspaper yesterday and today. And what I heard from the candidates was criticism of each other. I didn't hear that kind of leadership, particularly on environmental issues. And I think that's what people look to. And I think it's very, very important. 2 things I'd add to that, real actions. It's very critical because I believe people have lost faith in politicians a little bit.
Yeah.
And they want to see the real actions and tangible things that make a difference. And that's why I think it was important when you said our goal is 20% renewables that you did it. Even if some of it was a little more expensive than you felt. Very important. If you want to get rid of smog, you got to do that. You have to close the coal-fired plants. So I think that real actions. And the third thing is engaging the community. One of the programs we passed when we adopted our climate change strategy was a program called Live Green Toronto, which was about community engagement. And we put a substantial amount of money, I think $120 million, into little tiny grants to help the community do the right thing, which might be urban farms, it might be tree planting, it might be community-scale solar or geothermal installations, which works very well in our climate. And we also hired people to go work with the community and help organize, particularly in lower income areas. And that was extremely important, because if you're showing the leadership and you're taking actions and you engage the community starts to take over. And nobody can then stop what you've got going, because the people want it to happen. It's a very powerful combination.
Very true.
So both of you, and you were the chair of the C40, so the cities fighting climate change. You've been very involved. Los Angeles and Toronto, along with London, Copenhagen, cities like that.
New York.
New York have
San
been,
Francisco.
They've been the engine that's driven that along. What are the areas, especially when you look forward now into the 21st century, what are the other areas in environment and sustainability that the cities can and should take the lead on pushing their state, provincial, national, and international agendas?
Well, one of the things we're real proud of is, and that we've had to address, people forget about, in addition to cars, obviously a big part of our carbon footprint is, our over-reliance on coal. Like, I didn't understand when I got to 20% renewables why more people weren't, we were the first city in California to do it, so why more people weren't extolling the virtues of that. And what I realized was because we were still very coal dominant. And so, I think we were 49% coal when I became, or 47% coal when I became mayor. We're now at 36%. When we get off of Navajo, we'll be at 25, 26. When we get off of IPP, we'll be off, right? So I didn't understand that, and so that's why coal. Then in my second term, getting off of coal, I announced that was something we were going to do, and I've been fairly driven on that one too. The second thing we conserving. Not using the energy in the first place is the best thing you could do, the most inexpensive thing you could do. So we're conserving a lot more energy than we used to. We were at a point where we were 19 times what we used to. We're not there anymore, but we've made a very aggressive goal, more aggressive than the state, at where we want to be by 2020 in terms of conservation, because using that is important. Secondly, our port, what people don't realize about LA, other than cars, and which is still the biggest driver of our carbon footprint, the port is a big driver of pollution and carcinogens in the region. So I put an initiative to what the Republican mayor before me used to talk about, growing the port at all costs. He got sued at every turn, and he wasn't able to approve EIRs. The Democratic mayor, listening to me in my first run for mayor in 2001, adopted green at all costs. You can't green if you're not growing and you don't have any revenue. So we said, when I got elected, that we were going to grow and green, that you had to do both, that they were interconnected. We put a clean air action plan and a clean truck program. We've reduced truck emissions by 80%. We've reduced sulfur oxides by 76%. We've reduced diesel particulates by, I think, 69%, and so nitrate oxides by 51%. Game-changing, the most far-reaching effort to clean up a port in the world. And everything we're doing where others, ports are adopting. What we've done with that is connect that to the new economy. We're trying to grow the clean tech sector. We signed an agreement with UCLA, SC, and Caltech to try to help us do technology transfer. We've got a fund at the port that is helping to incentivize new technologies to clean up the port. We're trying to put together and I think just approved, it was a bad economy. We had proposed this, a clean tech corridor downtown, because we think one of the things that incentivizes people to want to do more of this is that they make money. And so what we're doing is developing a sector in this town that is focused on developing those technologies. So that's another area that we've worked on. I'll let David talk, and then I'll talk about transportation and what we've done. But that's another area that we've worked on. In the area, we recycle 72%, 76%. That's what we're going to announce. We hit. I wanted to be by the time I was out of here, I wanted to be at 75. I think we started at 62. We recycle 75% of our trash. There's one city in California that says they do more, and I believe them. There are a couple of them that say they're close to that. I don't. Yeah. New York and Chicago do not compete with us in that area. Nobody. For a big city, we are the standard in the United States. We also use the same amount of water that we did in the 1970s. We've had a 21% reduction in the use of water since I've been mayor. I upset a lot of these people because I told them they couldn't water their lawns as if we lived, in Toronto. We don't. We live in a semi-arid area, so we've had to limit water use and been pretty aggressive about it. So those are areas, and we're really focusing on being a zero landfill city one day. That's the goal that we've got to get, and that's why we recycle as much as we do.
I do want to say, in my introductory remarks, I mentioned the port. This is really something important. Again, it's something that doesn't get enough.
Nobody knows about it.
Yeah,
You would never know about it. The only thing you know, and my buddies here, Lipkis, what they love to say is that I promised 1 million trees, and I didn't get there. And I know you don't say it, and neither did New York, neither did Denver, neither did Houston. We're doing 10 times the trees we used to, but it's expensive. And we're in the worst economic, thing. So we did 350,000, 10 times what we used to. We didn't do the million, and it was that was a goal that did elude me, and we really wanted to get there. It was the worst economic environment, and the cost of getting there. What I realized, there were a lot of other things we could do, that we could get. And I had to retreat a little bit on the 1 million trees.
You know who did do their 1 million trees? Addis Ababa. I'm completely serious. I think they hit 3 million. They planted a tree for every person in their city as their Millennium Project.
Well, you know who did it too? Chongqing. Chongqing apparently did 2 million trees in 1 year. I mean, how do you compete with that? I mean,
but it's
the Chinese.
It's a bit of a lesson,
Yeah.
right? Because one of the things about the C40 organization that the mayor and I are part of is there's developing cities from the developing world there, and you actually can learn lessons from them. It's not all one-way traffic. So I want to pick up on something the mayor said, which I think is really critical. Because your question, Glen, was where the areas we go forward, and the mayor talked about linking the environment and the economy. And I think that's absolutely critical. And we're not going to achieve our environmental sustainability goals unless we achieve economic goals and social justice goals. So you have a decent society in which everybody can live in dignity and there's good work. And I think the clean tech and connecting, the cleaning of the port with new technologies and entrepreneurs is a really good example. There's a few others. It's probably a place where the cities haven't got as far as they'd like to yet. I think we've done a lot on pure environmental sustainability. And to do that, you look primarily at 3 areas. If you want to fight climate change, it's about transportation, how you heat and cool buildings, which is mostly about energy conservation, also lots of new technologies, and about energy generation. And those are the 3 big areas. And to get transportation right, you have to build public transit. You have to find ways to have low emission or electric vehicles. And you have to build your city in a way that works from a transportation perspective. Now, for built-up cities like Los Angeles and Toronto, that's more challenging. Toronto, in its core, is set up very well for transit. In its outlying areas, it's similar to Los Angeles. So we've got a challenge. The other 2 places where you have to pay attention to are waste management and water. But the big carbon reductions can occur in those 3 areas. And the incredible thing is, in cities around the world, there are real actions happening in those areas, energy conservation, for example, which are creating lots of jobs, which you can do programs with lower income neighborhoods to train people, so people who need work the most get it, and have huge carbon reductions. Same thing on transportation. I think we know what to do. Not all the answers are there yet on personal vehicles and cars, but we know a lot of what to do. In Toronto, for example, a simple thing, but our parking officers used to drive minivans. Well, what does a parking enforcement officer do all day? He or she walks between cars and writes tickets. In fact, I got one at 12:30 on Christmas Eve. I said to the gentleman, before I realized he probably recognized me, I said, do you really want to do this today? Anyway, they walk. So we took away their minivans, right? And we gave them
Did
bikes.
you do that after the ticket?
I told enough of that anecdote. The rest of it's a little embarrassing. But we gave them bikes unless they were in a really suburban area. Now that's, it's not a dramatic thing, but if you think about, 50 parking enforcement officers every day, 365 days a year, and the number of miles that they're not driving, and you can multiply that kind of initiative by the 1,000. But just those are the areas, and their initiatives exist, multiple. And I think the exciting thing about sustainability, once you think of it the way the mayor did, I'm going to drive this, the opportunities start opening up, and then you start connecting it with jobs and with social justice, and you get really positive results, and then you get reelected.
You hit it right on the head. When you look at LA, LA is the quintessential city of sprawl. I mean, we dismantled our public transportation system in the 1940s and 50s, particularly after the war, and we basically built out our city. There's 88 cities in LA County and in the metropolitan area, far more than that, and many of the people, most of the jobs are in the city, and people come from all these places here. And so it's created the smog and the air quality that we had. And you hit it right on the head, David. I mean, we had, before me, obviously Bradley is Tom Bradley, who was mayor for 20 years, is the father of, our subway and mass transit. But what we used to do is, we built the red line and the blue line, and then 10 years afterwards, you would start developing around transit stations. So I put Measure R on the ballot. It was a half-penny sales tax generating $40 billion and over 30 years. And since I've been mayor, we've opened up one light rail line, one busway, 3 light rail lines. We're in construction in 4 more. It's game-changing what we're doing. When I realized that we were in the middle of a recession, and the problem for people is like almost after a year. After a year, people would say, well, where's your subway? Well, ma'am, this was a half-penny sales tax, not a 10-cent sales tax. We're generating this money over 30 years, not over 3, And so the idea came up. We were in the middle of a recession. The feds weren't giving money. They were dealing with deficits and debt. And I came up with an idea that we called the 30-10 plan to accelerate 30 years of funding into a 10-year period of time. Everybody said we were nuts. I got the attention of the House Democrats. Then the leadership changed, and everybody said, well, that is dead. Then I went to both Republicans and Democrats, the White House, and after 3 years convinced them that we could accelerate 30 years of spending in a 10-year period of time if we could loan against future years, bond against, both loan and bond against future years, build now, take advantage of the unemployment, the lower bids because so many people were out of construction jobs. Finally convinced both parties to do it. It's called America Fast Forward. 1 million jobs will be created as a result. We still need a bond program. But we're doing something very different from what we did 20 years ago. So we're accelerating. We're doing more than we ever have in a shorter period of time. I put Measure J on the ballot, if you remember, those of you. But basically what I was trying to do is bond against future years, We got 66.11% of the vote, and only in California can you get a landslide and not get,
Yeah.
not
67.
pass. I needed 66 and 2/3. So we're going to the legislature to reduce the threshold that you need for transportation bonds to 55%. What's important about that is it'll allow us to accelerate. But you said it. We know what we need to do. The only way we're going to get people out of their single passenger automobile, because there's no city in the world that's as addicted to the single passenger automobile as we are. It's like this God-given right. I mean, that's why I was late. I mean, I was in traffic, and this is one of the few towns in the country where you don't put on your lights when you're mayor. I mean, it's just the world that we live in. Everywhere else you can, but here you
Would have been okay by us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And that's when I'm in Chicago and New York, I love it, because those guys just. But, so we got stuck in traffic, but the point is, what we're doing now that's very different, we're planning now. We're getting zoning changes, because the only way you're going to get people out of their single passenger automobile is to remake the city. So what you see is downtown Hollywood, on the Exposition line, once the subway starts getting built along Worcester Boulevard, we're going to have along corridors and stations, just planning to incentivize density, and I know that's a bad word in LA, but elegant, dense, and smart growth around transportation corridors, and that's when we're going to get the game change. That's when we're going to start to change habits. And then, I don't know if you guys followed it, but you saw what we did with the hot lanes on the 110 freeway, and we're doing it on the 10. Congestion pricing is going to happen in this town. We were the only city to get away with it. It was a big fight. The Democrats didn't want it because they said it would hurt poor people. The Republicans didn't want it because they said freeways ought to be free. We already paid for them. We shouldn't do it. But getting a system of hot lanes, that's what the 405 is all about. That's why I got the money for it. Is critical, everybody. We're going to have to make it difficult to get in a car. Not everybody can get in their car, go 2 blocks to the market. So when you live around, all the planners say this, by the way, too. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not making, I'm making it up. It's what we got to do in a city where, when our kids graduate, what's the first thing y'all do? You get them a car. So now we have, you see it every September when school starts or late August, you see the traffic go up again because everybody's buying a new car for their kids. We can't keep on living like that. It's not sustainable. It's like pension reform. It's not something sustainable going into the future. Or you're going to have gridlock on Sunset, Wilshire, and like you do already, even worse. And so remaking the city by kind of changing living habits and how people live and what they're going to see. You're seeing it downtown already. People living downtown are loving it. All the restaurants that walk in, people are walking more than they used to. It's where we're going. It's how you live in other great cities. And if anybody's ever been to Toronto, that's one of the great cities.
I want to say something. I was raised in California. I got a car at 16. I lived by that car. I then, being Canadian background, moved to Toronto. And within 2 weeks, I realized I didn't need a car. I didn't need to spend that money. And from my graduate student days, I had no car because that transit system made it was not only redundant, it was just a drain on my finances. So I've lived that dream, and it is nice. When you have the alternative, it's fantastic.
So I want to pick up on this because transit's critical, and it links prosperity and social justice as well. But I have to just talk about my daughter for a moment. Not because I'm really proud of her, which I am, but she's 17, just got her driver's license. When she was 16 and wanted to study for it, I said, Julia, what? You don't need to get a driver's license. I'll buy you a transit pass. That should have been front page news in all 4 daily papers. For those of you who have a 15-year-old, don't have that conversation. It's really stupid. So, conscious of time, but we're trying to take the same approach
that.
in Toronto as the mayor is in LA, and it's critical. So I ran for politics originally because of an interest in public transit, and I was very interested in it as mayor and took some strong initiatives. But it was all around an environmental economic philosophy that Toronto as a region needs to stop sprawling, and we need to grow inside the city. So our official plan, which is the legal document that guides zoning and really investment by the private sector, set out growth corridors in the city. And Toronto's a bit like a rectangle. So the growth corridors sort of went across like this and up and down like this. And the idea was we wanted to welcome growth in those corridors, which were predominantly major roads, and leave the more single-family residential home neighborhoods kind of the way they were with modest change, but big change along the growth corridors. And to accomplish that, we created a transit plan that relied heavily on light rail. Why light rail? It's less expensive, you can build it quickly, and you can build a network. And Toronto has a very good transit network, but it's good for a city of about 1.5 million. We're now a region of 6. And for 30 years, various political fights had prevented transit from being built. So we developed that plan. I promised to do it in the 2006 election. The plan was announced in March of 2007, and we were able to negotiate full funding for it by June of 2007, because in the Canadian context, the funding for transit comes mostly from federal and provincial governments. We pay the operating, they pay the construction. Very, very significant. Some subway extensions were appropriate, and an overlay of a really good bus network, and bus rapid transit in particular can work in certain areas if it runs in its own right-of-way, like the LRTs do. And that's critical, otherwise you get stuck in the same traffic jam that everybody else. And that strategy started construction by 2009, and we also had a subway extension underway. And I think that start of construction is really important because people see it, right? Really matters. Then you get support. You get support for the ballot initiatives, and people want to make it happen. And it's very much linked with economic growth, because that development will create economic growth. It will create synergies where you create livable, walkable neighborhoods. And you get a city that starts to function properly around the right environmental values. And I absolutely convinced that public transport and a good public transport network is the heart of that. I'm quite heartened about what the mayor's been doing in LA, because this city will be a very different city in 20 years. And people will say, what happened? You know, why it used to be full of smog, and they'll look back and say, well, it was these decisions. And, you know, it takes some guts to say, I want to raise your taxes, but you succeeded.
Well, and saying that in this town, you know, particularly people that live, I mean, we're used to, you know, this is a town that's used to living in a, you know, 3-bedroom house with a big backyard and a pool. And so, you know, this notion that we're going to live differently going into the future, not everybody will live in those, you know, kinds of neighborhoods. Some people will live more vertically. They'll be able to walk and shop and work in the same neighborhood. They'll be able to get on public transit. That's a radical notion here. It really is. So it has. It's been difficult to change the mindset. You know, most people see they're increasingly for public transportation for someone else, for their kids, you know, for the people that work in their homes or whatever, at their businesses, but not for themselves. And ultimately, you know, where we got to go is to be more multimodal in our approach to, you know, that's why we're doing bike lanes. I mean, I don't know if you know, I'd done a plan after I shattered my elbow, 1,600 miles of bike lanes. And this is where I take on the left, by the way, because I love the left. I mean, I love my people. You know, the environmentalists, I mean, the environmentalists won't let you build transmission lines in the desert because you're killing a tortoise, or won't let you put windmills because you're killing some birds, and can't find a middle ground, because those are important things that we want to protect, of course. But you know, for a bike lane, we had to do an environmental impact report to restripe a lane, and I had to go to the legislature, and the Democrats were afraid to take on the enviros, so they said, well, you know, this is stupid, and I'm for it, and I'll vote for it, but can you get some Republican or somebody that doesn't need environmental support? So I had to get a Republican to do it, and he did it, and they voted for it, and we got it signed, but we needed, an environmental impact report for a friggin' It's not, it's like, come on. I mean, it's like killing us. And so what we did, we did 80 miles last year. We were supposed to do 40. We're going to do 1,600 miles of bike lanes in the 30 years. I think in the first 2 years, even though we're supposed to do 40, we're going to do 160 because we did 80 last time. I think we're going to be at least 120. I don't want to put everybody under pressure, but at least 120. So you're going to get on a bike. You're going to get in a car. Now, this is what's been hard for us because he hit it right on the head. In order to really use buses the best way is you need dedicated bus lanes. This town they fight you on that.
That's a hard one.
Because the city council has been fighting me. I mean, I love them and I work well with them, but they're fighting me on the dedicated bus lanes because all the businesses beat you up that you're hurting business, and then the homeowners and beat you up because they want to be able to use that extra lane during traffic, and now it's more crowded. But you got to know, in order to address traffic congestion, and I saw a head move no when I talked about congestion pricing. You got to do all of those things. We got to have dynamic parking. You know what? You got to charge more for parking. Why? Because we can't make it easier. We can't make it so easy for people to get in their car to go 2 blocks. Sometimes you're going to walk, and to do these things does take, you talk about regrets. I wanted to do congestion pricing around the airport. My folks did a poll on it, and 90% of the people were against it. I said, I don't care. Do it anyway. It's the right thing to do. You got congestion there. We should have done it. But we are doing it on the 110. We're going to do it on the 10. People are going to get used to it, and you know what they're going to say? Hey, this isn't that bad. I could live with it. And we're going to have to do that with parking, and we're starting to move a little bit in that direction downtown. All of those things, all of those tools are planning tools, and there's planners here. Most of them will tell you, these are tools that planners around the world say, this is what you got to do as you're growing your population, and you got to go more vertical. You could still have a good quality of life. I think one thing we've learned from you, and I'm very proud of this in this town, crime is down dramatic levels. I tell people, in this economy, I'd have been thrown out of office if crime was where it was in the 90s. In the 90s, we've dropped crime 70% since the 90s. Since I've been mayor, 40%. So what happens now? You can walk downtown at night. You can be in Hollywood at night. You can walk around Westwood and Brentwood. I mean, this is a very safe city. It's per capita, safer than Denver, San Francisco, Orlando, you name the city. Only New York is safer on homicides. Actually, on violent crime per capita, we've just passed them up barely. Wow. And that's why, safety is also connected to that. Because as people start getting on subways with people that are different from them, they're going to, when you're safe, it's okay. When you're not safe, you see the differences. Yeah. And you avoid those things.
Well, folks, I know you have another engagement, and so
I don't. Just kidding. I wanted to be here with David.
This is great, and the fact is, folks, whether we're in Toronto or in LA, we're living in a much better city because of these guys' leadership. And the thing is, our kids are going to live in much greater cities. That legacy is going to continue on, and this has been fantastic. I want to thank you both. Let's give them a round of applause for all they've done.